So if I'm feeling stuck, there's this thing I want to do, but I can't quite get there. What is it that, um, what is the fear? What is it that I think will change in my life if I get to that thing? And does that change in my life if I get unstuck? Is it scary?
Hello, you are listening to the Late Bloomer Living podcast, where we are reimagining and redefining what it means to be in midlife, where we are gathering energy, momentum, and excitement for our next chapter via candid conversations with other midlifers about their own pivots, pitfalls, and triumphs. I'm Yvonne Marchese, your host, and I'm so happy you're here. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. Thank you for listening. I'm also excited to say that my guest today is Nicole Lewis-Keeber. Okay, I'm doing a little fangirling out. I've been familiar with her work for over a year now, and I'm thrilled that she joined me to talk about her journey from therapist to business coach. You see, Nicole is an expert in helping business owners understand how unaddressed trauma can hold them back in their business. We talk about the sneaky ways that trauma can show up and about how she learned to set strong boundaries in her life, thanks in large part to getting certified in Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program. Hey, even if you're not a business owner, I think there's so much that you're going to learn from Nicole and her journey. You see, after many years in practice as a therapist, Nicole realized that something was off. It was time for her to make a change. She stepped away from her practice, worked another job, and took some time to think about her next steps. And it took time, but she stayed open and curious and finally found the path that she's on today. She's now been featured on numerous media outlets, including Fast Company and NPR, for her work in breaking the stigma of mental health and business ownership. I can't wait for you to meet her. But before we do, I want to mention something, especially if you're new to the podcast. I'm wondering how you're doing. I'm wondering if you have a project on the back burner or are itching for more out of life. I'm guessing the answer might be yes, because here you are. Maybe you keep thinking about finally getting in shape or finally writing that book and can't seem to make yourself take the steps to make it happen. You just feel stuck. I created a free guide for you designed to help you start taking the steps towards your next act. It's a workbook. It's called 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. And you can sign up to receive it as an email series with practical exercises that you can use over the course of several weeks to get past that stuck feeling. You can do this at your own pace, as they'll be waiting for you in your inbox when you're ready for the next step. And I'll remind you at the end of the episode and tell you where to sign up if you're interested. Okie dokie, without further ado, here's Nicole Lewis-Keeber. Let's go.
All right, Nicole, I'm so glad you're here.
I am too. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you, man. I always like to say where I found people, and here we go. What works? Love Tara, love the Monday Huddle. Just amazing connection. I've been watching you, I feel like, interact with Tara for the longest time. And so I'm slightly starstruck by you, I will say, because I love your approach. And what's nice too is that even though there's a little bit of starstruck, you're just so nice and approachable that every time I see an interaction with you, I'm like, oh, she's so, I just think you're, the bee's knees.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very happy to have you here, obviously. So, man, where do we start? You were a therapist and you have taken a turn and with your business and all tied into your life too, right? So what I'm going to do is have you go back and define for us what was the germ of flipping your business away from therapy to doing the coaching, the business coaching that you're doing now, that's so still tied in to your background
Mhm.
as a therapist. So I'll
Yeah.
let you roll with it for a second.
Yeah, I think that with many people, we come to a point where the the BS that we're in gets above our nose, and we can't breathe anymore. We have to make a decision, and that's kind of where it was with me. Because my last job, and I'm putting in air quotes, was as a clinical supervisor for the methadone clinic here in Lancaster, where I live.
Ooh, wow.
Yes, so I was doing that. I was still seeing private clients, for my therapy. And I was physically unable to keep that up. I was having weird symptoms, kind of like that burnout that we all hear about. And so it wasn't sustainable for me anymore. And so I had to make a choice what to do because, in the social work world and a lot of service delivery type of arenas like therapy, and we aren't really taught how to take care of ourselves. It's all
Mm.
primarily focused on the client and the patient and getting people through. And it wasn't a sustainable model for me anymore. And so I took a step back from it, but I also still wanted to work with people because that's what my entire focus in my life has been, to help people, begin to change their trajectory too, whether it was in therapy or as a clinical supervisor for other counselors to help them see what their potential is. And so I tried to figure out, well, okay, so how could I still do this and not feel completely, burnt out? And that's when I had worked with my own life coach. And as a therapist who has been in therapy, and then to work with a life coach, like that's a step out of a comfort zone, because I have to say, as therapists, there's a little bit of, a little bit of eyebrow raising about the whole coaching world. Maybe a little bit less now. And I feel like I have some part in that. But, 6 years
Yeah.
ago, it was like, So, but I saw what was available to be able to help people reach a goal, change their perspective, do some really good work within that, life coaching sessions that I had. And so I was like, I really like this. Like, I'd like to try this myself. And so the first certification program that came up for me was like the most, the one that was in my price point and was happening right away, was to do money mindset coaching. And so, and I really liked the focus of this program because she was talking about how not just money mindset tricks, but kind of like how paradigm shifts around money, and who gets to have it and who doesn't. And I knew I needed that because I had taken a vow of poverty as a social worker. I mean, let's be honest. So I really had. And so I was like, well, I think this will help me and I can help other people. And it did. It changed everything. And so I started a business as a money mindset coach. And what was really interesting is that the people who were attracted to working with me were business owners. They were entrepreneurial. And I think the fact that I had been a therapist gave them permission to look at some of their own personal challenges through the lens of their business, because it was worth it to do the work for their business, right? Maybe they hadn't gotten there to it being worth it to do for themselves.
Yes. Isn't it funny how we need to hang our worth on something outside ourselves? Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so that's who I started working with. And we began to make the connection between trauma and money. And then I furthered that connection to start to see the intersection of my own business, where childhood trauma was actually playing out in the relationship I had with my business. And it just changed everything that I saw, as we don't drop our baggage, if you want to call it that, at the door. We start a business, that we bring all of the experiences that we've had, like all the strengths and the challenges and the internal worthiness and the, ability, like all those things get jumbled up and they come with us when we start a business. And so what I do now is I really help people understand the impact of childhood trauma on their business. And it was something I went through. I help my clients with. You and I met in What Works, and I had a coffee one day with Tara and Shannon, who are both, Tara's the, I guess, founder of What Works, and Shannon's her right-hand person.
Right. And community manager. She does amazing work.
She's an amazing human.
Right. Yeah. Really.
Love her.
Really. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. And I was in that moment of shift from money mindset coaching to trauma and entrepreneurship. And I remember I was talking about it because Tara's like, what are you doing? What's up in your business? And I told her, I said, I'm really want to do this work, but I feel like I keep being told by people that I shouldn't use the word trauma because it scares people, that I should call it something else, but it's not something else. It is literally the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, she's like, use the word. Your people will identify with it. And she said, it's what you're passionate about. So you can't fail at it. So go for it. Right. And so ever since then, the focus of my business in some way has been exploring the impact of childhood trauma on entrepreneurship, leadership, and business owners. So
Wow.
All that to say, this is where we are.
Right. I mean, I saw something recently that was like, if you want to really get to know yourself as a human being, become an entrepreneur, because it's going to bring up all that stuff. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I see what they mean. It's crazy, oh boy, it really does bring it all right into your face.
Yeah.
Wow. What a journey. So you were burned out, and then you decide, I love that you just, that you have that I love Tara, because she'll cut through it and say, just use the word you want to use. Right. Amazing. So how did that transform your experience going forward into coaching by owning that word?
I think it allowed me to own my expertise. Right? Because I was trying to keep my clinical background very separate from what I was doing. And it was impossible to do so because, as I said, we don't drop our baggage at the door when we start a business. But the thing is that when you are entrepreneurial, when you start a business, it's a high dive into personal development, whether you like it or not. And so a lot of the voices in personal development at that point were really mindset oriented. And I often saw mindset being used as a weapon in the coaching industry because people would say, you just need to shift your mindset, or you're not available to an expansive experience, like all this language. And the people that I was working with were saying, I've really tried all these things and they're not working for me. And I feel bad about it. So they were having shame about the mindset tricks not working for them. And they couldn't work for them because they had trauma that was unresolved that was showing up in their business. And I was like, it's not supposed to work for you. And so there was just no way to not use that word, because what it required me to do, which I do almost every day in my business, is to define what trauma is and help people begin to see that, that thing that's not working for me isn't working because I have unresolved trauma from my childhood that I didn't see was trauma.
I was just going to ask you, is there anybody who doesn't have childhood trauma?
I have not met anyone yet. Whether I really haven't,
right?
Whether it is the systems around us that other you out, right? Because your lived experiences is in a minority in a majority system, like that's trauma. People who are neurodivergent within neurotypical society, that is trauma. I grew up having a learning difference. And so every day I went to school, into a classroom, and with a teacher who did not know how to teach me, or I didn't feel like I belonged because I didn't learn the same way. That's trauma. Moving around a lot and always being the new kid and having to assimilate yourself and abandon the individuality of yourself to fit in. That is trauma. So I have not met anyone yet who doesn't have some version of an event that had an effect on them that changes how they see themselves. And so then they behave and act in a way to try and mitigate that. And I just haven't. But the problem is that these are seemingly insignificant experiences that we as a culture have diminished and overlooked and do not define as trauma. And so therefore people feel bad about having that experience that happened when they were 8, still showing up for them when they're 30, right? So they internalize that shame around it. When the truth is that you went through a traumatic experience, but there was no availability for you to be able to kind of complete the trauma cycle, so to speak, because it was minimized and diminished and your feelings were not validated, because we as culture don't see those experiences as trauma. We just see them as, you just had a bad childhood, or everybody had a hard time at school. You think you're special, particularly if you're in the generation I am, which is like this Gen X
right.
generation, like we're rough and tumble. Like, there's a little bit of a badge of pride of like, we survived our childhoods. What are you talking about? We're badasses. So
yeah, they talk about free range childhoods now, and that's like what we had, right?
Yes,
I think I was
yes.
walking to school by myself in second grade. I'm like, I think about it, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Same. Same. I mean, not only did we raise ourselves, but we survived it, so it's like, it's really hard sometimes to get people to see that, but your inner 8-year-old is still struggling with what happened in that cafeteria or on the walk home or, so I think we need to call a thing. And that's part of what I do in my business is calling a thing and to say, this is what trauma actually is. Yes, you actually experience that. And so when you have a hard time trusting an employee or a client signs on for a really big project, and the next thing you know, you're out of scope trying to do more for them than they asked for because you're afraid they're going to leave. All of those things can be very well traced back to experiences that we had in our formative years that are still playing out in our nervous system and kind of in our patterning as adults now. So if I don't call it trauma, then I'm doing it a disservice. And so I'm so thankful for Tara that day to say, no, call it what it is. And for her to give me her audience for so many times over the years to talk about these things. And I've seen a transition and a change in that community because of that conversation and the way that she does business because of that conversation. And I just think that when we allow people to tell something that's true, we open up capacity. So that's why I keep fighting for it now.
Yeah. Wow. You've said so much that's kind of blowing my mind right now. And the whole idea of using mindset as, what did you say? As
a weapon.
As a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that you can, how can you get through this? Like, is there a way to use mindset or mindfulness or anything to still to do this? Do you have to go to therapy? Like how do you deal with childhood trauma if everybody has it? And I think you're onto something there. I do.
Yeah, I think normalizing going to therapy, taking the stigma out of it, because we all need some support that doesn't have emotional conditions to it. Like I have the best friends in the world. Like, the majority of my friends are coaches and they do personal development. Like they really, really do. And we can have really deep conversations, and I still need someone who's mine, that doesn't have an emotional buy-in to what I have to say about myself in the world. And so I think, normalizing, utilizing therapists is going to be helpful, like destigmatizing it. It's part of the work I do in my programs is to help business owners understand that, okay, so your trauma is coming into your business. You need to recognize that. You need to see in the ways in which it does. But you also need to understand how it's showing up for your clients. So this client that's resistant, maybe they're not doing, let's say you're a business coach and you have this client and they have a business and they're not doing their homework or they're not doing the things that you're asking them to do. I often hear in this world of coaching and personal development where clients will get fired because they're not ready or they're not compliant or they're whatever. And my question is, if you could see that client might have some childhood trauma showing up that's keeping them resistant to the tasks that you're asking them to do, because you're putting in a business solution on an emotional challenge, and that's never going to work. What could change in that relationship that you already have established with that client? If you could see that trauma might be showing up here, it could be a referral to a therapist. It could be having a different conversation with them and saying, I'm noticing that you're gung-ho when I give you all these solutions. But then we come back together again in 2 weeks and you haven't really had any movement on that. And I'm really curious about that. And I'm wondering, are you telling me what I want to hear in our session? Where is it between, you're excited about this idea and then you go to put it in place? What's happening for you there? And I think that there is some trust that's built between that coach and that client. If that was part of the conversation, that could be built on, right? And then that maybe there could be a conversation there and that they could be of service, but they need to understand that trauma's in the room and they often don't. And they personalize it. And then next you know that client's gotten fired.
Yeah. And I'm not a coach. every now and again, I think, oh, should I go get certified to coach? I don't know. But if I were a coach, and I'm just putting myself in that position, imagination wise, and somebody presents in front of me who I think may have some trauma, I, I would feel completely out of my depth
Mhm.
to go there with them, you know? So yeah, like, so that, would you, in that case, just recommend if somebody doesn't have the training that they just say, hey, this may be something you want to deal with somebody
Mhm.
who has the qualifications to do that?
Yeah.
Would you say, hey, maybe we take a break while you deal with that?
Mhm.
Do you, yeah?
Yeah, all those scenarios. It could be taking a break. It could be a really stellar intake process where you refer out and you have all these therapists over here that you really trust and like to be able to refer people
Yeah.
to say, you know what, I think that there's a few things that you need to work through before our time together will be beneficial. And I really want it to be. There's so many ways to approach this. And there are also times where, I work with people and they have a therapist and we work in tandem.
Mm-hmm.
That's also an option. And whether you're a business owner, a coach, a teacher, I think that if you are working with human beings, you need to at least be trauma informed in some way to understand that the thing that's in front of you that's confusing, is it resistance and obstinance, or is it an actual trauma response?
Mm-hmm.
And the most recent book by Oprah Winfrey and Dr. Bruce Perry, called What Happened to You,
Oh my
really
gosh.
begin.
As we were talking, I was thinking about Oprah's
Mhm.
thing where she thinks, instead of thinking what's wrong with you,
Mhm.
what happened to you, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And whether you're in medical profession, you're a teacher, you're a parent, you're a coach, you're a therapist, it doesn't matter. When you're dealing with humans, trauma is definitely in the room. And so the more trauma informed we can be, or I say trauma conscious, I think the easier it is for us to help people then get where they need to go. And that's why I was talking about earlier that mindset's often used as a weapon to say, well, you're just not ready for this. And so that becomes exclusive. And then the client's like pushed out because
Mm,
they're not ready for a mindset shift, right?
mm,
Mindfulness can be really alarming and activating to a nervous system that's been traumatized. And so rather than being curious about it, oftentimes they just will dismiss the client as being problematic,
mm, mm.
right? And so
Yeah.
this is why I bang this drum of trauma informed or trauma conscious entrepreneurs or trauma conscious human beings is
Yeah.
important. It really is important.
And you would recommend that book as a stepping stone, the Oprah.
Absolutely.
What was the name of it again?
It's called What Happened to You.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's easy
Yeah.
enough to remember.
I think if you're a human being, you should read that book. If you're a parent, if you are tasked with being in care of some other human, reading that book or listening to it, I think is super helpful.
Great. I will put that in the show notes as a link so people can find that, check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, wow. So much richness to talk about. You were in your 40s when you decided to make the change from therapy to coaching,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And is there anything that you would say, looking back on it now, like, how long was your journey from the time you realized, I call it feeling stuck,
Mm-hmm.
right? um, you're there and you're just stuck, and I'm sure there was like a processing time before you realized, this is overwhelmed, this doesn't work for me, I need to move on and I'm going to go become a coach. How long was that process for you? What was that like?
Oh gosh, I would say probably a good 6 years, because what happened was I got married again
Mm-hmm.
and recognized some childhood trauma showing up in that relationship. So I went to see a therapist who was a
Mm-hmm.
therapist for therapists, right?
Uh-huh.
So I started that internal work on, healing some of those traumas that was impacting that relationship. And then because of that work, I began to see that, the job I was in was not sustainable for me and it was showing up physically. So I
Mm-hmm.
began to look at, after we ruled out everything, I wasn't having a stroke. I didn't have MS. Like I literally was having, physical somatic reactions to the stress I was under.
Right. I
And
hear
I
that
began,
over and over. Oh my gosh.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so I recognized it. And I was no longer willing to accept that because of the work I had done. And I began to look for options for myself to leave. And so I didn't jump directly from that job into coaching. I actually took a job with a Medicaid contract in Mississippi that I could work from home to do. This was back when working from home was rare, because I needed some space. And so I did that for a year. And that's when I was working with the life coach. And I literally put out into the universe, I was like, gosh, I really wish this job would like lay me off. So I could have like a good 4 months of just, I'll just file unemployment. I just want to be laid off so I can just regroup, right? Literally within a month, I got laid off because they laid off all of us. Anyone who was not in Mississippi, we got laid off. So I was laid off from this job. And then I had that room to go through the money mindset coaching program, take some time, and begin to work towards starting my own business. So there was a time frame that happened. It did not happen all at once because readiness is important, right? I wasn't ready. And even with all that readiness of doing that therapy around trauma in my relationships, it still showed up in my business because who's looking for trauma in their business? So
right.
And so,
what are you doing here?
Right? Like, what? What are you doing here? But it was good because it was a good thing because it literally is the foundation of the work I do now. Like, so it was a progression that needed to happen. And during that time, I started reading Brene Brown's books because she was a fellow social worker. And I really, The Gifts of Imperfection, what a beautiful book. And just from there, I started to study her. And so, I think sometimes people think it's just, overnight. It's not. It's an unveiling. Healing happens in the small moments. And when we make space for it, then we can begin to see what those next steps are for us. And for me, it was studying Brene Brown. It was, getting certified as a money mindset coach and starting to do that, and then following the thread, following what made sense next and recognizing it, and just, not being afraid to say yes to that next thing. Or being afraid of doing it anyway. Yeah.
I'm raising my hands. I'm waving in the air. I'm doing a little testify, girl, because that's it. It's following the thread. I mean, you did the work. You stayed curious, you stayed open, you followed the thread. I love that. I mean, that's how you do it, right? It never ends either, does it?
No. I'm following a thread right now.
It's not like you get there and you get through the thing and you're like, all right, I'm cooked, I'm ready to go. Wow. Wow. And speaking of Brene Brown, like eventually you did her Dare to Lead training. Right? I want to hear all about that. I love her. Oh my gosh.
She's amazing. And so, I actually was, because I was following her so closely, I wanted to learn from her. Right. And I knew she had this certification program called Daring Way that was for therapists and pastors and people like that, but I didn't have the time and honestly the money at that point to invest in it. So, but then I heard that she was going to do something similar for Dare to Lead, to train facilitators to take this really amazing work on leadership out into the world, because she and her team were doing it themselves, in all these big companies, but they needed more people to do the work, right? So it was time for them also to train others to do it. And I was like, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So I remember putting my application in, like, of course I waited until the last day because that is me. But I waited, I put my application in, and within a month they had made their decisions and I made it. So I found out in January that I got in. And so the training was going to be, there was 3 trainings. There was one in March, one in July, one in September. And I chose the one in June, sorry. Booked all the trip and spent 3 days with her and her team in San Antonio. It was so hot. I just can't tell you how hot it was. But it was amazing to spend 3 days with her and her team, learning to facilitate the Dare to Lead processes while we were going through it ourselves. And it really comes down to self-leadership. So, when I offer these trainings now to other people, I always tell them, I'm like, I'm not going to teach you the best way to run a team, meeting. It's not about that. It's about self-leadership first. So be ready to look at yourself, right? It really is. And so watching her and her sisters and her team leading from a place of self-leadership through those 3 days, and like how they set up the boundaries of, no photos, and we're on our own break. Don't rush us. We need a moment
Right.
too.
Go back to that, because I'm earlier when we were talking about this, you mentioned that Brene had set up boundaries, that she was really good at setting boundaries. So go back to that. What was the no photos thing? What was that about?
Yeah, so she said that, and this is probably by many years of experience. One of the very first things we talked about was setting loving limits and boundaries. And she said, I want you all to know that you're going to have a chance to have a photo with me from your table, because we did all of our work for those 3 days as a table. Like, I was table 8, I think, pretty much sure I was 8. And she said, we're going to have a chance to have a group photo with your table at the end. So just, no photos. It makes it weird. I'm your peer, I'm your colleague. And if, I look up and I see someone flashing their phone and taking a picture, it makes it weird. And she's like, I don't want our time to be weird with each other. So no photos. So no, we didn't do that. It was fine. And we were glad to understand what was okay and what was not okay. That's what boundaries are. What is okay, what's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to take a break. We need our break just like you do. So we ask that you don't, kind of rush us during the break. Fine. We're not going to do that. So then I was in the bathroom and she comes out of the stall and I'm like looking down, I'm like washing my hands. I'm like, don't make eye contact, because she's on her break. And where I'm like, my eyes are down. And she goes, you can say hello in the bathroom. It's okay. And I was like, oh, it's so nice to meet you. So it was funny that she recognized that I was taking her boundary to like an extra limit, and broke the ice and said, it's okay to make eye contact and say hello. Like, you're being ridiculous here in the bathroom. So I just thought it was funny, to see how she modeled the boundaries and how her team really modeled, in a way that I think was super helpful for us. And it was just a fantastic 3 days, because you can imagine the people in that room. And at one point I was feeling like, oh gosh, I can't believe the human beings that are in this room. And she said to us,
remind me, how many people out of how many applications got into this?
So we had around, I think we had around 80 to 90 people in our cohort. Right. And I think that she said that was around 800 people, I think, who went through this at this point. I think at that point it was around 600 or 700, because they've done a few extra things. But so yeah, and she said, listen, you belong here. Like, it's almost like she could read the room. She said, you belong here. You were vetted and you were accepted, and you are here for a reason. And it just completely broke the ice in the room. And I like literally wrote it down on a Post-it note that said, you were vetted. You were accepted. You belong here. Let's stop with that nonsense, and it really allowed, I think, a lot of us just to open up and not only enjoy the time, but really learn some really amazing skill sets that, honestly, learning all about the boundaries and everything was going to be immediately useful to me in ways I had not anticipated. So I'm really super happy that not only professionally that I went through that training, but personally as well.
Absolutely. Boundary setting is still something I struggle with. So just incredible and I love how she was able to read you and to clearly state what those boundaries were, to let everybody know, and then, read the room she knew everybody's coming in with their thing and feeling, like imposters, right? She's just got the experience on that. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So because we're going down this path, and so you finished your training with Renee, and you told me, like, right after that, you had a significant personal experience.
Yeah, I had all my whole year planned out, right? I was going to train with Brene, and I was going to come back and start offering Dare to Lead, trainings immediately. Had it all planned out. And the week that I came back, I had a mammogram. It was a diagnostic mammogram, and they saw something, and then they did a biopsy. And within 3 days, I was told I had breast cancer. And so that changed everything. And I have to say that time with her, understanding how to say what is okay and what is not okay, and what self-leadership means, was just so valuable to helping me navigate the journey that we're still on really at this point, but those first early days of who gets to know this and who doesn't.
Mm,
What do we need to understand for ourselves before we share this with other people?
mm,
Because I was kind of trained, and taught in my family structures that everyone had a right to know everything about you, right?
mm.
And that was not going to be the case with this. And so it was so helpful to me to have that training and that personal knowledge about what was going to be okay for me and not okay for me to navigate over those next 6 months of just early stages. So,
Yeah. Did it
yeah.
help you as well in setting boundaries around your treatment with your doctors and different things like that? Because I know that that can be, I mean, I imagine it could be a little overwhelming to have somebody suddenly telling you this, and your brain starts to go everywhere, and there you are faced with decisions on how you're going to
Mhm.
manage this, right? Based on what
Yeah.
they're going to recommend for you. And
Yeah, we had a really terrible example of what it means to tell someone they have cancer.
really,
Yeah, it was an awful
sorry.
experience. Like it was just bad. Like the nurse was preoccupied, the systems were down, and and she gives me a book with a tab, like a sticky note outside of it, and said, "This is the kind you have, and we're going to set you up with a surgeon." And my husband and I are looking at each other, going, "What's going on?" And she gives me a tote bag
Wow.
and this book, and she says, "I will call you to schedule with your surgeon because the
Did you
systems are
even, did
down."
the doctor even tell you or talk to you?
No,
That's
no.
crazy.
It was a follow-up with a nurse to tell us what the results were, the initial idea of what the results were, but we wouldn't know what to do next. Um, and so I walked out of there. We're both crying with a tote bag, and we got in the car, and he looked
That
at
is
me,
not
and
the
I
kind
looked.
of swag you want to walk out with.
No, because everybody
No.
knows what your swag is, right? Everybody out there knows what that swag's about.
Oh my
So we
gosh.
got in the car, and Jason looked at me, and he's like, "What do we do now?" And I said, "I feel like they should at least given us a certificate to go get an ice cream cone or something, because that was messed up. Like, what do we do? I feel like we should go get ice cream now, because I feel like we should have gotten like a coupon to do that or something." I'm like, this is so messed up.
Right.
Yeah. And so what we did is that weekend, we're like, we're not going to think about this. We went to the beach. And we're like, we're not going to think about this. There's nothing we can do about it. We are going to talk about other things. And it wasn't denial. It was a boundary. Like
Yeah.
we knew the next step was coming, and we wanted to be in the moment without that next step being present for us. And so from then on, it was like we told very few people for a very long time. And so those
Mm.
boundaries around what our doctor wanted us to do and the time frame, because they want to get you in and get you going. And I was like, ho, 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 wait a minute. I need to process this a little bit first. Are you telling me that if I don't do this today, that I'm going to mess up my chances for survival? And they're like, no. And I said, so you're telling me you want to get me going though? And they're like, right. I'm like, okay, so we're going to take a step back, so
Good for
those
you.
boundaries were super helpful in navigating that,
Hmm.
and also navigating family and friends and who gets to know and when and how much and, all that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you, Brene. Thank you.
Right. Wow. 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 Boy, that really is an example of how not to tell somebody that they've been diagnosed.
It was comical, but you know what it did in the moment
Wow.
is it gave us someone to be mad at.
Right.
So we got to come together and be mad at her. So,
Right. You know what? There, you know what? Yeah. Yeah, that can be useful, and it can be useful to have some place to put anger.
mhm.
Hmm.
Yep.
What
I'm
an
okay, by the way,
interesting
just for anyone who's
observation.
listening.
Yes,
Yep,
yes.
I'm fine. I'm fine. We got through it. So,
You got through it. And you said you're still dealing with some of it. Is that right? Is that just going in for checkups? What is that?
yeah. So once you have the type I had, which is the triple positive, and HER2 positive, it's an aggressive type.
Yeah.
But mine was stage 1, so and no involvement. So they threw all the things at it, but so it requires screening. And so in a couple of weeks, actually, I'm going in for an updated screening. And so you're in. And one of the medications they want you to take long term, I couldn't tolerate, and so I'm kind of outside of the window of what they like for you to do, post treatment to keep it for survivorship, they call it.
Hmm.
Um, so we're there. But yeah, you just kind of, it's not done because they want you to get to 5 years without a reoccurrence for you to be considered out of the
Mhm.
woods. And so
Mhm.
it's a part of your life, for many, many years.
Yeah, yeah. I had
Yeah.
on a much lighter level, I had melanoma on the bottom of my foot many, many years ago.
Mhm.
And similarly, you were reminding me that you're like, okay, we're not going to think about it this weekend. I was going down the path of what ifs, and my husband is like, you know what? Until we get the next bit of information, let's assume it's all good.
Mhm.
Let's just assume the best until we know different. And that was really helpful. And then
Yeah.
for me it was like a little they removed it, 3 months on crutches, and I was done. I was
Mhm.
very lucky, we got it really early. But yeah, your mind will go down the path,
Yeah.
right?
I remember really early out because, again, we gave ourselves the space to think about, okay, so what does this mean to us? Right? They're going to throw everything at it. I had to go through chemo, radiation, the whole thing, which is unusual for a stage 1 cancer, but it's because of the type it was.
Mm-hmm.
And we had to get really clear and, again, set that boundary emotionally and energetically around what it meant. And so what I would say to people once they started to find out and they would get very frantic about it, and I would say to them, listen, I am no closer to death than you are, right? We're not guaranteed anything, really, not to be morbid, but
Mm-hmm.
anything can happen at any time. So I don't want you to look at me and feel bad and think that I'm closer to death than you are, because none of us are guaranteed anything. So let's just stay in this moment of, this is something that I'm going through. It is something that can be dangerous. It's something that, it does, kill people every day, unfortunately. But so do car accidents. So do all the other things. And so we're not separate. We're not different here. It just looks different.
Wow,
And so I
amazing.
just kind of reflected back to people. I'm like, no, don't send that energy over here, because we are the same in the fact that we have this moment and that's all we have a guarantee for. So, like, look at your own life.
Wow.
Look at your
That's
own life.
amazing. What a great thing. How long was it before you told people? How long did you take before you started coming out with it?
We sat with it for 2 weeks ourselves, and then we
Uh-huh.
decided who we were going to tell, and we
Hmm.
told very, very, very close friends and family.
Hmm.
And then we started which one of those pages where you kind of update stuff. I can't remember the name of it now. And we said to them, this is how we will update you. This is how we will update you.
Great, man,
Right.
man. I bet
Yeah.
taking those 2 weeks was key in being able to you set the first boundary by giving yourself time, and
Hmm.
then that time allowed you to figure out your game plan on how you were going to manage those boundaries going
Yeah.
forward, right?
Yeah. And we said to family, we said, listen, we are not your people to help you with this. Right? We're going through our own version of this. So if you need support, if you need to manage your anxiety, or if you need to manage your fear that you're going to get it yourself, because I have sisters, we're not that for you. You need to go talk to a friend. You need to go get a therapist, like what, or go get your own mammogram. We are not that for you. We cannot be that for you.
Right.
And so we were very clear about what was, again, what was okay, what was not okay, and utilizing us to process this. And it wasn't until
How smart
October.
of you to even anticipate that
Thank
that
you,
was going to
Brene.
happen.
Well,
Oh
this
my
is when you
gosh.
do your own work around trauma and differentiation and boundaries and understanding the people in our lives who can handle things and who can't handle things. It does give you some liberation and freedom from feeling like you have to tell them that they're not necessarily going to be the person that can support you through this, and that they probably can't manage it. And so I don't need to be a witness to what you're dealing with around this, my cancer diagnosis.
Hmm.
Um, so it wasn't until October, when I was going to be in chemo, we knew it was going to be really hard, kind of obvious at that point what was going on, that we
Right.
told people at large. And I wrote a social media post that was pretty lengthy about what was going on, and, again, what was okay and what was not okay, that I don't need to hear from you that your aunt died of it, or that your cousin survived it, or what treatment worked for you, or it was very clear about what I was here for or not here for. um,
Yeah.
and even so, people are people. They're still going to slip through. You're still going to have problems. It still
Yeah.
happens. But
Yeah.
I think that people don't often understand that you have a right to your space, your energy. You have a right to tell or not tell. Like, I could have gone through the whole thing and not told anybody. It would still been my right to do so.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oof.
So it's a big, big journey.
Really, really, really. I'm
Hmm.
so glad that you've come through it,
Yeah, me
and
too.
you're on this other side of things. It's amazing. Congratulations.
And my business loved me and supported me through the whole thing. So there's
Wow.
that too. Yeah.
Um, so getting back to then the business, so then you go through that process, right? And you've got to just take care of yourself. Did you step back from the business at that point
I
and
kept the
take?
clients I had. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
All the Dare to Lead trainings had to go on the shelf.
Hmm.
Um, I was already starting a group program at that point that was going to be 8 months. And I let them all know. And I said, this is what's happening. And it's happening as we are going to be starting this group. It was an 8-month program. And I said, if you are not available for this journey, it's okay. We will, and no
Hmm.
judgments. I will refund your money. You do not have to be here for this. I get it. Nobody did. I was also in a mastermind at the time where I said, if I stay with this mastermind, y'all are going to see me through, like literally through this journey. Are you okay with that? Because if you feel uncomfortable, maybe you've had someone who's gone through it, you can't hold space for it, then I'm okay with not being here for this. And again, they were there.
Hmm.
So that's all I did is I stayed with my group program, and I saw the clients that I had at that time. I didn't take any new people. All the Dare to Lead stuff went on the shelf for a while. It was a very quiet time, but even so, I still had my business. It was still supporting me. I was still doing podcast interviews, and I was lightly working on my book, at the time. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it provided a nice little cocoon because I needed something to look forward to, and I looked forward to my groups.
Yeah. Yeah. To have that connection with people, right?
Yeah.
And keep thinking about something other than the big C
Mm-hmm.
and the process and what's going on with your body. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
So important. So with Dare to Lead and just like in general going forward now, how long has it been since you finished treatment?
Um, let's see. So I had my last radiation treatment in Baltimore the day before the lockdown.
Oh
So
my
this is another thing. Like we were waiting. When we get done with this, we're going to travel. We're going to have a party. We're going to do all these things, and like none of that happened because literally we slid into a pandemic. I've never had my post-cancer party. I turned 50 this year. No celebrations. Like I was like,
no.
ah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
So it's all that stuff you keep telling yourself you'll get to do when it's over. Like we're still waiting for that because of COVID. But
Wow. And
um,
then I imagine you was COVID a little freaky deaky for you? Because then there you are with an immune
oh yeah.
compromised system and
Hmm.
uh
Yeah,
wow.
we did nothing. We did not leave the house at
Right.
all. And in fact, until we had groceries that were able to be delivered, we had friends dropping groceries off for us at that point. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. We're good
Amazing.
now. But at that time, it was a little scary because I was
Yeah.
still immune compromised. So,
Yeah. Wow.
so yeah. So I would say like that was a year and a half ago, was the
Hmm.
last treatment. Yeah.
And here you are.
Yeah.
And what's
All
next? So
in.
you wrote a book.
Hmm.
You got that out in the world, which is
Yeah.
amazing. The book How to Love Your Business,
Hmm.
right?
Yep. Published that in April.
Congratulations, man. What else is going on? Like, what have you done with Dare to Lead, or what are you thinking about that, or what's next?
Yeah, it was so much fun because I actually jumped in and we had a live Dare to Lead training planned that spring. And we were having to regroup that as the pandemic was starting to happen. And so we took it online, and we actually really loved it because it was designed to do in person, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. But we then pivoted really quickly to do them online. And it's been really fun to do that because since then, we've continued to do them online and not in person because then we have people from all over who get to be in cohorts with each other, not just the local.
So you shifted to online and embraced it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Amazing.
and we actually had we were going to do one live here local in Lancaster. We had one scheduled to do in the Atlanta area, and also was it Wisconsin or I can't remember, somewhere in the Midwest. And we had to shift all those, right? And so all of those ended up being online. And so we did 4 Dare to Lead trainings in 2020.
Wow.
Yeah, big ones. And so it really taught us a lot. And it was a way for the people who are with us to escape what was happening. A lot of them said, this
Mhm.
is 3 hours. I get to not think about the rest of it.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, yeah.
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 And so this year we did one in the spring. We're doing another one in the fall. So we've kind of seen like what works and what doesn't. Um, and so we'll probably be doing 2 of them a year at this point. Um, but it's such a useful program because the tools that you learn as you see, whether it's, leading a team or leading your business or leading yourself, it's having a skill set and a framework to utilize in these really highly emotional situations, I think is invaluable. So,
Yeah. Wow. Gosh, I'm so happy for you and so impressed. It's
yeah.
just yeah, just completely bowled over by your resilience and yeah, the way you've tackled everything. W-
Yeah. Thank you.
So if you were to um, give advice to somebody who's in in the middle of the feeling stuckness right now, what would be your first recommendation?
Um, well, first of all, recognize that you're in good company because you're human. And secondly, knowing that sometimes stuckedness has to do with a nervous system response and that your nervous system is trying to keep you safe and that that's normal.
Mhm, mhm.
Um, but then also to understand that there's some information in the stuckedness, to get a little interested in so if I'm feeling stuck, there's this thing I want to do, but I can't quite get there. What is it um, what is the fear? What is it that I think will change in my life if I get to that thing? And does that change in my life if I get unstuck? Is it scary? Right.
Mhm,
And so
mhm.
start to kind of do some self coaching or self inquiry around what is the stuckness? What's the mechanism or the purpose of it? Because it's there for a reason. Is it to keep you safe? Is it to give you time to think this through? Is it because this is not what you're supposed to be doing? I think when we stop judging the stuck and look at it from a different way, that we can get a lot of good information about it.
Mhm, mhm. We do spend a lot of time judging ourselves,
Hmm.
don't we?
Hmm.
Guilty. And listen to me using the word guilty right there. There's a little judgmental term.
It's a biological imperative. I told some the other day that was,
Mhm,
comparing themselves of like, don't beat yourself up for being in comparison. Like it is a biological function of like, okay, is this person stronger than me? Do they have more? Do I need to align with them? Like our nervous system is just trying to keep us safe. And that is something that is normal to do. Right. So
mhm.
then don't pile on to yourself about it and feel, guilty about it. Just say, oh, okay,
Yeah,
this is what's happening right now and move
yeah,
on.
yeah. Oh my goodness, so great.
Mhm.
What are you reading right now, or watching, or binging, or
Yeah, so I've been listening to Brene's podcast on the new edition of Gifts of Imperfection with her sisters.
I heard the first episode of that. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love just hearing them. Just the talk, the
I know.
singing. Oh my God, the Boz Skaggs. Guys, you got to go listen to this first episode
It's good.
of this.
Yes.
Listening to them all
Yes.
sing Boz Skaggs was just killing me.
I
But
know.
anyway.
I know. And seeing them, when we were there training with them, like they work for her. So we could see all the sister dynamic and the business dynamic. Like it was just fun to watch that all happen.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, that's what I'm listening to. I also am listening to Martha Beck's latest book, and I can't remember the name of it.
Ooh,
I don't know what it is, but it's her most recent when I'm listening to it on
I'm gonna
Audible.
have to look that up. Okay, cool. So Martha Beck's
Yeah.
latest. Yeah, love her. Okay. And I'll try to get that name of that and put that in the show notes for folks. And I'll put the Brene Brown podcast. Is that on her Dare to Lead pod? Because now she's got the two podcasts. She's got Unlocking Yourself and she's got Dare to Lead, right? And I'm
Yeah, she
trying to
has two
remember.
podcasts. It's on the other one. It's not the Dare to Lead one.
Okay, it's on Unlocking
I think
Yourself.
it's on
Cool.
Unlocking Us. Yeah.
Unlocking Us. Is that, am I getting the name wrong? Okay, Unlocking Us. Cool. So I'll put links to those for people too. What are you excited about that's coming up next for you?
Yeah. What I'm excited about is my Do No Harm Intensive. I've done 2 of them this year, and they're really kind of a journey of understanding, like, first of all, what trauma is, how it impacts your business, the relationship you have with it. It looks at how your clients might be showing up with trauma, your employees, how that dynamic might be playing out, and also how you can do no harm as a business owner in your marketing and your sales processes, like all those things. So it's kind of a microcosm of what it means to be a trauma conscious, business owner or entrepreneur. So we've done it twice, and it's coming back again in the fall, and I've really streamlined it, and I've done some updates to it. I'm excited about. I have guest teachers who are coming in to teach. So I'm really excited about that part of my business, because I think that is the foundation of my work. It's helping people do no harm to themselves and their business, and the people who come in contact with them in their business. And I've had people from artists to therapists, all people go through this because they want to become more trauma conscious as business owners. And you can be trauma informed as a therapist and still have no idea how it impacts business. And so I would love more therapists to go through my program.
Wow.
As well. So I'm excited about that. I can't wait. The teachers I have coming in are there's beyond. So
Wow. That sounds exciting. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to think about that, Nicole. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So much. You are unstoppable.
So far. Yes.
I love it so far. Well, at some point we're all going to be stopped, right? As you said, that all we're guaranteed is today. But so admiring of everything that you've managed to do so far to get through the challenges in front of you, and spread the help that you do through the world so generously. Yeah,
appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's so my pleasure.
Well, there you have it. Setting boundaries. I think that's my big takeaway from this conversation. Do you have trouble setting boundaries? I sure do. And then, I find myself feeling overwhelmed, overextended, and stressed out. I am slowly learning that when I say yes to something, I'm also saying no to something else, because there are only so many hours in the day. I also think it's interesting that there could be some sneaky little t trauma playing out in the background and keeping me stuck in those old habits of people pleasing. I am learning though, and getting a little better at setting boundaries every day. I started doing things like blocking off time in my calendar to work on projects, the big projects that always seem to get pushed off. And that way I don't overbook myself in other ways. That leaves me the time to do the thing that I'm wanting to do, Anyway, I'm for sure going to be picking up a copy of Nicole's book. Speaking of which, if you want to know more about Nicole, I will have that information for you in the show notes. You can just go to latebloomerliving.com/podcast and click on the show notes for episode 70. And hey, while you're there, here's your reminder. You can also find a link to the sign-up sheet for your free guide, 5 Steps to Your Midlife Reboot. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a fantastic week. Stay safe and well. Talk soon.